Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for bringing this group together to just study your word. Thank you for the words of your prophets and the faithful men whom you spoke through so long ago, God. And thank you that your word is a living word, that even thousands of years later, your word still holds meaning and truth and can touch us even now, Lord. So I pray that each of us would be touched tonight by your truths. Give me your words to say and give us softened hearts to receive those words, Lord. Love you, Father, and we pray your blessing upon this time in your name. Amen. All right. So, the book of Micah, guys, it's not Luke. So,
Yay!
last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, technically, we did a little introduction to Micah. You guys remember? I'm just going to do a quick quiz on you. Who were the kings that Micah was? Who were the kings of Judah when Micah was prophesying? Remember? Also, if you don't get this right, you have no excuse. I literally posted the link to the Bible Gateway passage, and it's in verse 1.
Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah.
Jotham. Yes, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So Jotham was the first of the three, Ahaz was next, and then Hezekiah was the final king that Micah served under. Now, was Micah a guy from the city, or was he more of a country bumpkin? We'll call it. That's probably not fair to Micah. Nobody members? Micah, city boy or country guy?
I'm speed reading chapter 1 and I haven't found the answer yet.
I'm not going to come outright and say it, but Doc is correct with the guess. He is definitely a country boy. He is from a city by the name of Moresheth, which is southwest of Jerusalem, right on the border of Philistia.
Oh.
So we're gonna go ahead and just dive right in here. Could I get someone to read the first 7 verses of Micah chapter 1? Don't worry, I'll go ahead and put the command up. There we go.
Oh. I just read this, so if you like, I can read it again out loud.
Go for it.
All right. The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth. Oh man, I read right past it. Sorry. In the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Hear, you peoples, all of you. Pay attention, O earth, and all that is in it, and let the Lord God be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord is coming out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And the mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split open, like wax before the fire, like waters poured down a steep place. All this is for the transgression of Jacob, and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? Therefore I will make Samaria a heap in the open country, a place for planting vineyards. And I will pour down her stones into the valley, and uncover her foundations. All her carved images shall be beaten to pieces, all her wages shall be burned with fire, and all her idols I will lay waste. For from the fee of a prostitute she gathered them, and to the fee of a prostitute they shall return.
Thank you. So, that's quite a way to start a book, isn't it? So the first thing is as Micah identifies himself. He is Micah of this city named Moresheth, and he gives the time in which he is prophesying. And he states that these were the word of that this was the word of the Lord that came to him, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Now, what's Samaria? The grand scheme of things. At this time in history, what is Samaria? Person typing. Couple people typing now. Two people with ideas. Awesome. Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel as opposed to the southern kingdom of Judah after the nation was divided. Yes. So after Solomon was the last king of the United Kingdom of Israel and Judah, they split under the two kings. Rehoboam took the northern kingdom, Jeroboam took the southern kingdom, and Samaria was named the capital of the northern kingdom. So yes, what Micah is saying here is that these are prophecies that are going to concern the two capitals of the divided kingdom. Samaria in the north, Jerusalem in the south. Okay. Now, what is the picture that you think Micah is trying to paint here, talking about God coming down? How is God portrayed here? How would you describe God's approach or his dealings that he's about to um, bring to pass? What are some? How would you describe this? That's I wasn't expecting a gift, but I'm not sure why I wasn't. That's pretty accurate. It seems like God is coming in wrath and judgment. He is not happy, and he has a score to settle. I mean, just look at some of the descriptors that he uses. He says that he's coming out of his place. He will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. The mountains will melt. The valleys will split open like wax before the fire. That is some imagery. God is clearly not happy. Why does Micah say this is? What is going on that has got God so upset? Yes, we get it. Doom. Correct, yes. Yeah, this is all about the sin of the nations of Israel and Judah. God is, we'll call it royally ticked off. And so he is going to have to teach his chosen people a bit of a lesson, unfortunately. He uses this phrase. He says, "What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria?" And he says, "What is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem?" What is Micah saying here? Because he calls out the whole the sins of the nations. It's like, what is the transgression of Jacob or Israel? And then he names Samaria. Is he saying that it was a sin to set up these cities? Ah, okay. I think Kess has got it. For all intents and purposes, this is saying that the sin that is corrupted these lands, its root is in the capital. It's reached to the highest portions, the highest reaches of the land. So Samaria is emblematic of the sin of all of Israel. And okay, I don't want to leave anybody behind. When it says that Jerusalem is the high place of Judah, that is double entendre for one. So yes, Jerusalem is a city built on a hill. So it literally is a high place. It stands above. It's easily defensible. It's a strong city, but a high place in to the Jewish minds, to someone reading this would understand, a high place was a place that was built up as a place of idol worship. So you would kind of rise up on this hill and you would set an altar or your idol or whatever at the top of it. And so that was a place where idolatry and this false worship would happen. And so when Micah says, when Micah, God through Micah, says that the high place of Judea is Jerusalem, he's saying the idol worshiping is happening right there. Okay? You guys with me? Make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Then God says, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Samaria and make it a heap in the open country, a place for planting vineyards. So Samaria, the capital city of a nation, was usually meant to be a very strong place, a fortification, somewhere that could defend against enemy assaults because it was the most important place. It's where the palace was, where the government was. You didn't want that city to fall, so it was meant to be strong, usually built on a hill because that made it more defensible, all sorts of stuff like this. God says, I'm going to go down to Samaria. I'm going to level it. I'm going to flatten it. I'm going to make it like a place where you plant a vineyard. And vineyards are notoriously not great growers on a mountain. Go to the what's it called in California?
Napa Valley.
Thank you.
Wow.
Napa
Wine
Valley.
country.
Yeah, it's wine country. It's down in the low places. It's in flat land. That's where the best place for growing. And God says, I'm going to make Samaria. It's not going to be defensible for anything. It's going to be in a valley. It's going to be flat. There's going to be no. It's not going to serve any strong purpose. I'm going to make it just useless for anything except for like farmers and people who want to just live off the land. No government, no strength. I'm going to uncover her foundations, like just completely rip it up out of the dirt. Yeah. So he's just saying, just there will be. I'm taking what the strength that it supposes it has, and I'm just removing it. Then he gets a little more specific because he calls out their carved images, and the carved images in this case are what?
It would seem to suggest wood.
Okay, not what are they made of? What are they?
Oh, idols.
Excellent, Doc. Golden calf. Yeah. So all her carved images will be beaten to pieces, her wages will be burned with fire, and all her idols, there it is, I will lay waste. So, like, here is the emblem, or like the object of God's wrath is this idolatry, the idol worship, because God, as we know, is a jealous God, and He desires worship, and that's what Israel was meant to do, was to be His chosen people. Is in that He owns them, but in that they worship Him alone. And now they've got all these idols and they're worshiping all these other people, and God's like, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm the only God. I don't bow to anyone. I don't play second fiddle to any graven image. We're getting rid of them. He says, from the fee of a prostitute she gathered them, and to the fee of a prostitute they shall return. What the heck does that mean?
Well, this is a fun one.
It is kind of a fun one. Got an answer for me? Do some typing.
I can think of two reasons. One is that idol worship in that time and era, and many other places and eras, was very like they had holy. How do I say sacred prostitutes? Holy is the wrong word, but
Yeah,
all of the
they had
shrines had
religiously
prostitutes.
dedicated prostitutes. Yes.
Yes. The second is in all of the major prophets. I think Ezekiel, especially, God is not shy about calling both Israel and Judah prostitutes.
They play the
Very
harlot.
graphic language.
I mean, if you want to get really graphic, you can go and, just take a look at Hosea. Hosea is another excellent book that plays off that theme. So, yes, and Phoenix, it says they run back to their sin. All of these are excellent. So, yeah, Hosea is saying, or Hosea, heaven help me, Micah is saying a few things here. So he says, yes, the idea of the prostitution that's happening during this false worship of these idols is definitely a thing. And all these idols are emblematic of that. But in that same time, as Keth said, Israel is playing the part of a harlot, of a prostitute, in that they are supposed to be God's chosen people, but they've run off and are messing around with all these other gods, these other foreign gods, and they're leading them astray. So what God says, I'm going to completely destroy these idols, but the way in which he's going to use them is going to see those idols then used once again back to their purpose, that God's going to destroy the idols, but the silver and gold from those idols is going to be used again back to their original purpose, to be turned back into idols to lead other nations astray. That's all that it's good for. The silver and gold, it may be taken and turned into something else, but it's just going to be another false god that's going to lead more people astray. It's just a cycle.
Just wondering about the connection of that for money. A lot of tradable money was silver and gold.
Yep.
Sorry if that was already mentioned.
And there's we'll get into this. Well, actually, let's do it now because this is a good point. You guys know what historical event this is referencing? Because this prophecy did actually come true. It's already been documented. It actually didn't happen very long after Micah made this.
So for Samaria, was it the Assyrian invasion, and then for Judah it was the Babylonian invasion? It was actually two events, right? Or am I wrong?
Let's pump the brakes a little bit. So yes, the fall of Samaria happened in 722 BC at the hands of the Assyrian Empire, and yeah, they trashed Israel, left it, for lack of a better word, just a just a burning ruin. And yeah, just to drop this in. Yeah, the reason why the Jews in the New Testament don't like the Samaritans is because after the fall of Samaria, Assyria had this thing where they would transplant people from one fallen nation and move them to another one. And so they did that. They moved people from another foreign nation and dropped them into the lands formerly, or the land where Samaria had been. And these foreign people intermingled with the remaining remaining Israelite population there, and continued to dilute their faith. And so they intermingled with people who weren't Jews, and that's why the Jews in the New Testament viewed them as half-breeds and didn't like them. So yeah, Samaria became the idea of Samaria and the Samaritans was abhorrent to the Jews by the time the New Testament rolls around. So yes, we are referring to the fall of Assyria in 722 BC at the hands of the Assyrian Empire. But that's not the end of the story. Let's go on. Let's tackle Let's tackle what comes next. Yeah, chapter 1. And we'll run through the rest of the chapters. So verses 8 through 16. Can I sit someone to take these?
I'll take it, but give me 1 second. I just took a bite of
Oh,
food.
yeah, go for it. I don't know. Having food in your mouth might help you pronounce some of these names. I don't know.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I
For this
applaud your
I
courage.
for this I will lament and wail. I will go stripped and naked. I will make lamentation like the jackals, and mourning like the ostriches. For her wound is incurable, and it has come to Judah. It has reached the gate of my people, to Jerusalem. Tell it not in Gath, weep not at all. In Bethleh Ephrath, roll yourselves in dust. Pass on your way, inhabitants of Shapur, in nakedness and shame. The inhabitants of Zanan do not come out. The lamentation of Bethazel uh, shall take away from you its standing place. For the inhabitants of Maroth wait anxiously for good, because disaster has come down from the Lord. To the gates of Jerusalem. Harness the steeds to the chariots, inhabitants of Lachish. It was the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion, for in you were found the transgressions of Israel. Therefore you shall give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. The house of Ashakib shall be a deceitful thing to the kings of Israel. I will again bring a conqueror to you, inhabitants of Mereshash, and the glory of Israel shall come to Aldulam, Alduin. Make yourselves bald and cut off your hair for the children of your delight. Make yourselves as bald as the eagle, for they shall go from you into exile.
Thank you. That's not easy. I applaud you for your the effort.
I only had to
Well
make
done.
fun of one of those at the very end, Alduin.
Cave of Adullam. We'll come to that one because some of you may recognize that name. All right. So Micah takes off in verse 8 and he says, "Now I'm going to lament and wail, and I'm going to go. I'm going to just stripped and naked, and we don't know if he actually went naked, but lack of clothes or shoddy clothes and ashes and such. What that's a sign of mourning, of great sadness, right?" And so Micah says, "For her wound is incurable. It has come to Judah. It has reached to the gate of my people, to Jerusalem." What is he talking about?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Then what is Micah wailing? What is he bemoaning? What is this calamity that's coming upon Judah?
War and
Who?
utter destruction.
With who?
With who or from who?
With who? It's war.
Yeah.
God,
With,
we know that this is a prophecy from God, so ultimately it's
yeah, yeah.
from him, but who's at war with?
Sorry, was this one Assyria?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. So this is a continuation of the thought from the first half of the chapter. And if you want historical record of this, you can actually swing over to 2 Kings chapter 18. About 20 years after the fall of Samaria to the north, the king of Assyria, a man by the name of Sennacherib, goes on a campaign against Judah. Hezekiah is king in Jerusalem, and uh, there are a number of interactions that play out between the messengers of Sennacherib and King Hezekiah. Ultimately, well, we won't spoil anything. For those of you that know, you already know, but let's just play through the story. So 20 years after, or roughly 20 years after this, Sennacherib decides to go march on Judah. Yeah. Historians put it at 701 is what I saw in most of them. So roughly 20 years later. First thing that Micah says, he says, "Tell it not in Gath." Where's Gath?
It's the capital of the Philistines.
I think it was the capital. I have to look that up. But it is a city in the land of the Philistines. It's where Goliath is from. And so Micah at this point, because remember, these aren't his words, these are the words of the Lord that came to Micah. So in many respects, Micah's hearing this for the first time too. And so his response is one of absolute, like, just wailing mourning. He's like, these are my people that are going to suffer as a result of this, because God is showing him what is going to happen when Assyria goes in this campaign against Judah. And so he sees a number of cities fall. And you can actually map this out, that the Assyrian campaign goes along the western coast and then kind of curves inward past Philistia and moves eastward towards Jerusalem. And that's kind of the order in which Micah names these cities. So as he proceeds with the Assyrian army and sees the destruction of these cities, he names them off. All right. So, for those of you that were here 2 weeks ago, do you remember what I said was the difference between the Greek and Hebrew languages? Europe?
Change your mind.
I said that the Greek language is very precise. It is it's almost like a legal textual document reading it, in that it's laid out very, very cleanly. It's very concise. It's very direct, and it tells you exactly what it wants to say. Hebrew is basically the exact opposite. Hebrew is a language that's full of puns and wordplay, and it's poetic, and it likes to kind of dance around itself. And here in Micah chapter 1, we have that shining example right here. Because what Micah does here is he takes the names of these cities and and I don't want to say he makes a light-hearted pun about them, but to the Jewish mind, the name of something held a much significance. And so Micah is going to take the names of these cities and say, hey, here's what's going to happen. And he's going to play off of their names with that. Okay? So I actually have this pulled up. I got to find the actual. Where's it at? I got to go through my notes and find the listing, because all these cities have really interesting stuff. So let's start with the first one. So you've got La Afra. Some places pronounce it Beth Ophrah. So the literal name, anybody want to take a guess? I'll just ask this. Does anybody want to take a guess what Beth al-Afra means?
Is that Bethlehem?
It's not Bethlehem.
Fields of... Okay.
No,
it's not the fields of Ephratah. Okay.
No, but Beth does. Some of you may know what the word Beth means in Hebrew. Anybody know?
I actually don't.
So if I tell you that Bethel means house of God, and
Oh.
and Bethlehem means house of bread, Beth means house. So, with that in mind, Beth Alafra means house of dust. Look what he says about them. He says, in Beth La'afra, you'll roll yourselves in the dust.
I was gonna say dust, but I'm having mic issues.
Oh, you're fine. But yeah, absolutely. That's it. So he says, look, that's your name. That's what you're going to do. You will be a house of dust where you will roll in the dust in mourning for what's coming. Next city. Verse 11, pass on your way, inhabitants of Shafir, in nakedness and shame. Shafir, the word that means beauty or beautiful. Inhabitants thereof will go in shame and nakedness, led into exile. Zanan, name literally means, or it means going forth, or like to leave, to exit. But it says that the inhabitants of Zanan do not come out. Got
It's a bit
inside,
ominous.
they're besieged. Beth Ezel. Take away. Does Micah say? The lamentation of Beth Ezel shall take away from you its standing place. Arath. Arath means bitterness. The people of Marath were waiting anxiously for good because disaster had come down. You can see bitterness sprouting from that. Now, this is an interesting one in verse 13. It says, harness the steeds to the chariots, inhabitants of Lachish. And Lachish is quite a city that's named a number of times throughout the Old Testament. Probably most significantly, or the earliest, is that named a fortress city. It's one of the strongholds of the nation of Judah. It is one of their refuges where you could make a stand. So just kind of fortified city of Judah. Its name literally sounds a lot like the Hebrew word for fast horses, which the Hebrew word is rekish, and this is named Lachish. But also, because it was a fortified city, it would have a number of horses to use to engage in battle. And so you would think, they take their horses right out into battle to meet the enemy. What's it say? Harness the steed to the chariots, inhabitants of Lachish. It was the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion. So it's not riding out to war, it's riding in fear, it's riding away, fleeing. End of verse 13, it says, for in you were found the transgressions of Israel. Israel just got absolutely smoked by the Assyrians. They burned down the capital, took all their people into exile, and the same sin that caused that was found in Lachish. And it was in Lachish that the sin really began to spread. That's where it really started to take root and spread throughout the land of Judah. Doesn't forget, and he does hold accountable for sin. Therefore, you shall give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. Where have we heard of Moresheth before? Name sounds familiar.
Is that his hometown?
That's his hometown. That's where Micah's from. Its name in Hebrew means bride, the wedding, a wedding bride. It says, therefore you shall give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. That mean?
It sounds like a cruel irony.
It is. So going back to circling back to what's actually happening. Remember, this is an Assyrian invasion, and there were three historically through in the Bible. There are three uh, confrontations between Sennacherib and Hezekiah. The first time Sennacherib invades, and he imposes a heavy tribute on the people of Judah to spare them of their spare them the capital, so that he wouldn't take Jerusalem. Uh, Hezekiah gives in. He actually strips or pulls a hefty amount of gold from the city of Jerusalem, including inside the temple. And along with that went a number of cities. And it is presumed that Moresheth Gath is one of them.
Oof.
As the houses of Achzib shall be a deceitful thing to the kings of Israel. So, based on that description, what do you think Achzib means?
Honest.
Go the other direction.
I was going to say liar.
Yes, it means deception or a lie. Yeah. So the town of Achzib was a town of workshops. It was a very industrial center, and people would get a certain amount of riches from the work that was done there. But that's going to be a lie now. There's going to be no riches coming from there. Because I will again bring a conqueror to you, inhabitants of Marashah. Marashah means possession. Someone else is going to possess it, another conqueror. Then lastly, the glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. Now, does anybody know of another spot in the Bible where Adullam is mentioned? Very significant one.
The cave of Adullam.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
What happened there? Was that where Saul embarrassed himself?
That's a good way of putting it. Yes. So the cave of Adullam was a place where David was hiding out from Saul while Saul was looking for him. And Saul went in to relieve himself in the cave, and David was there, and he's like, "Hey, I can totally take him out." But instead, he goes up and he just, cuts a piece of cloth off from his cloak. That's the cave of Adullam. It's in the wilderness. It's a hideaway. It's not anything glorious or noble or anything. It's literally just a refuge for hiding from someone. The glory of Israel, nobles and such will run to the cave of Adullam to find safety, to try and get away from the disaster that's befalling Jerusalem, or falling Judea, I should say. That is a rough prophecy. So Micah ends it off by saying, "Make yourselves bald and cut off your hair for the children of your delight. Make yourself as bald as the eagle, for they shall go from you into exile." And make no mistake, there were a bunch of Jewish people that went into exile at the hands of the Assyrians. But for those that know the story, did Sennacherib conquer Judah?
He took some of the cities, but he was not allowed to take Jerusalem.
Why not? What happened?
Was it Isaiah? Hezekiah besought the Lord, and the Lord sent an angel and struck. Well, it was a two-part play, right? Sennacherib came in, and he's issuing all kinds of threats against Jerusalem, he actually was shouting in Hebrew, right, to the men on the wall,
Correct.
and shouting threats and describing a siege and the end of the siege. And then Sennacherib was called away. Something happened in Assyria. He had to go deal with it. So he sent a letter of threat against Hezekiah, like, don't think this is over, I'll be back. And Hezekiah took it to the temple and spread it out and prayed over it. And that's when the prophet was sent to him. And they said, don't worry about it. God says he's not going to shoot an arrow or set one foot or anything in Jerusalem.
Right. Yes. So to cut a long story short, I said that there were three confrontations between Sennacherib and Hezekiah. Gosh, these names. The first one was where Hezekiah kind of capitulated and gave him the tribute. But then the next two, Hezekiah responded in faith to God, the first time ending with turning to the prophet Isaiah, who comforted him and said that God would deliver. And the third time, Hezekiah prayed to God again, and God then responded by striking down the Assyrian army. And so, again, going back further in the passage in Micah, go all the way back to verse 12, talking about all the stuff that's befalling the nation of Judah. It says, in the second half of the verse, the disaster has come down from the Lord to the where? This little bit of verse 12. Came to the gate of Jerusalem, but it didn't go into the gate of Jerusalem.
Wait, are you in chapter 2?
Oh. Verse 1 of Micah. For the inhabitants of Maroth wait anxiously for good, because disasters come down from the Lord to the gate of Jerusalem. It came to the gate, but it didn't get in. God did visit judgment upon his people, but didn't destroy them the way that he had the northern kingdom. Historically, it took about 2 years for the nation of Judah to recover, to be able to kind of rebuild their agricultural capabilities. They were basically kind of foraging off the land for a while, trying to rebuild and repair everything after the rampage of the Assyrians. That being said, prophecy fulfilled. We have historical evidence, even from some of Sennacherib's own annals, some of the historical records left by him mention going to Jerusalem. And it says that he shut up the entire city of Jerusalem so that no man left. But even Sennacherib doesn't say anything about taking the city. He mentions Hezekiah straight up, and the historical veracity of the Bible is maintained because the two line up. Exactly. Historical records from a lot of kings during ancient times would talk very largely about their successes, campaigns where they went and battles that they won and such, but you don't find a lot about their defeats. It's the Bible unique in that it talks both about the great successes and victories of the nation of Israel, but also some of their lowest times as well. Again, just because it's not about Israel, it's about discovering who God is. This is Micah's first prophecy that we have recorded. It is about the coming disaster of the Assyrians, both upon the northern nation and the southern nation, but only one was wiped out. God wasn't done with the southern kingdom yet. Just because he didn't destroy them doesn't mean they are absolved of everything, that there aren't still things that he needs to call them out for. we're going to get into that over the next few weeks. Do any of you guys have any questions, any thoughts, concerns, anything that you think might have been left out or that you don't understand? I will do my best to try and answer them. Got quiet. When we think of prophecy, we often. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just reading back over, and I thought I had a question, but I can't remember it. So,
Well, if it comes to you, feel free to interrupt me. When we think of prophecy, I think most of us think of prophecy hundreds of years before they were made. We think of like the prophet Isaiah, who made the prophecies about the suffering servant, the Messiah, 600 years before Jesus was even born. And we think of that, but this prophecy was made very close to the actual event, to the point that Micah was potentially even alive to see it.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah. It was like,
Just,
if that was the case, Micah's just, after the whole thing happens, Micah's just standing there being like, having the greatest told you so moment. Yeah. I mean, clearly from verses 8 and 9, he's like, I'm not feeling that, but he had every right to be that way. Being like, believe me now. That dude would
I remember.
That dude would have credentials forever. Yes, go ahead.
Is this verses 3 and 4? Is that what does this turn it into? What would be known as apocryphal literature? Like, I don't know. Like, this isn't. We don't know if there were literally mountain eruptions, or maybe there were. I don't know. But this seems to be a literary device. I guess that's my question.
I'm like,
is this a literary device, or did it happen?
Micah does have, future prophecies, like ones that have yet to be fulfilled, but they're not mentioned for a couple chapters down. I tend to think this is. None of my studies really indicated that this is an indication of, of apocryphal nature, or not apocryphal, apocalyptic. That's the term I'm after. Apocalyptic nature. Because there's nothing else that happens within the scope of chapter 1 that really ties into that. Everything was very historical in referencing the Assyrian army. All that everything there was completely fulfilled. It happened just as Micah said it would. And so I think this is, again, the Jewish or the Hebrew language just being very, I won't say flowery, because that's definitely not the right term. But yeah, being a literary device, it was giving personification to the wrath of God over his disobedient children. That's how I would view it. Like I said, when I was going through, I didn't see anything that seems to hate that. I'm just kind of looking through some of the commentaries that I have pulled up talking about it, and none of them mention the end times idea. It's more about displaying God's judgment upon sin and his wrath at disobedience. What is that meme? What is that?
Can you imagine living knowing that was going to happen? Like right now, I think in the U.S. we're all pretty tense about the next few months. Imagine knowing that the worst was going to happen, and now what?
Yeah, that it kind of really contextualizes his response in verses 8 and 9. It's like, even if the nation isn't going to be completely wiped out and it's going to survive, it's still catastrophic. Like I said, it takes years for Judea to recover, and to know that not only are there 9 different cities mentioned where the Assyrians are going to go on an absolute rampage, one of them is his hometown. It's dark. Absolutely, it's one of the things that I read was the idea that, you know, prophets, we get the idea that they're often, we can get the idea that they're aloof when they give these prophecies, but again, they're men and they're giving the word of the Lord. Often, you know, they didn't conjure this up. This is God coming to them being, hey, tell people this. And so God has to inform them first. And so they would logically have a response. And how deep and how emotional that response must be if it affected places that you knew, people that you knew. Can't be completely detached. Let me see if I can find how somebody, let me see. There you go. This is something that's one of them wrote. Micah didn't just announce judgment and then yawn. He cared so deeply that he wept with God's people. The preacher's duty is more than to just announce judgment and to walk away. He has to care. Many who have rejected a Christian's logic have been won by his tears. Also, I forgot to mention this, but this is a completely side point. But in verse 8, it says, I'm going to make my lamentation like the jackals, in the morning like the ostriches. You guys ever heard an ostrich mourn?
I mean, it sticks its head in the ground.
Okay, yeah. But when was the last time you saw an ostrich in the Middle East?
I've never been to the Middle East, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know. So the in looking through this, there are different translations for this word. I don't know that
I was going to ask.
Are in the Middle East. The ostriches are typically a bit more south and west. Other translations translate the word as owls, which I think could potentially fit a lot better.
As you know, when I translate something, owls and ostriches often get confused when I
Look, I am not a Hebrew scholar, all right? I don't. I'm not. I don't know like how. Yeah, but maybe the words are similar.
It's
maybe ostriches know more than, or you know, have. I've never heard an ostrich cry, like not actual like, you know, sadness crying, but like the sound they make. If they make a sound, all I know is that I'm not getting close to one because I will die. It's one of the few things in life that's probably taller than me and will beat the ever loving snot out of me. I think well, that's true, Phoenix. I think it's more of an image of the sounds that the animals make, because he references the wailing of jackals. So I think it's more the idea of kind of an accentuation of the sound.
Yes, I just looked it up. So ostriches are said to have a mournful voice, especially at night in the desert, and some say it sounds very similar to the sound of a child crying.
Interesting. Okay, so it could
Specifically, it says a horse child crying. Horse, not the animal horse, as
Oh, okay.
in like course.
Oh, well, like why not just
they've
call it
been
like a filly?
they've been crying for a while. That
Yes,
kind of horse.
they have a rough throat. Yes, they have a sore
Yes,
throat.
yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, we're learning in real time, guys. This is cool.
Yay, Google.
Oh, there's my fun fact for today. I want video of it now. Like listen to the sound. So, any other questions, thoughts, or anything before we close out? I'm just a little bit past. I actually did a fairly decent job tonight.